What's up, everybody? Welcome in to a pregame edition of
Mm.
SSPN. We got the Spurs matching up with the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'll just leave my facial expression at that. If you're listening on podcast, you can imagine what it looked like. But the good news for the Spurs, Ethan, the rodeo road trip is finally over tonight. So maybe we can at least make this game competitive. That's kind of my hope. We've got smacked in the past two games. Obviously, they're at the top of the West. I haven't checked the standings today, so maybe they've fluctuated from 1 to 2, but y'all get what I'm saying. I'm just hoping we can be competitive in this one, Ethan.
There's been some positive strides, I think, in the past couple of games to give us a little bit of hope. Of course, along with being at home finally. I think it'll be a high energy game, Jude. To keep it simple, I think we'll probably lose the game to go out on a limb. But it'll likely be in the classic Spurs fashion of, two quarters where we're playing out of our minds, but ultimately either the third or the fourth quarter will give it up.
Yeah, that's probably about what will happen, Ethan. If the Thunder don't just do what they've done to us in the other two games we've played this season, which I will pull up right now
Mm.
since we're talking about it. Well, actually, this is the Timberwolves box score, which we're going to get into in a second. But before we get to that, I do want to check out the Thunder's game or the Thunder games that we've played this season, just to give everybody a little bit of a refresher. Obviously, they're not pleasant. Here is the most recent one, I believe. And that is, of course, a 140-114 victory. And that was in the January game that we played them. Shea
Mm.
Gilgeous had 32. Chet had 17, 9, and 4. And Aaron Wiggins, I remember that, Ethan, had 22 off the bench sniping
Mm-hmm.
against us there. There were some other guys, Wemby and Devin had, they got to 20, but this was obviously a blowout game. Now, if we can go find the other game from earlier this year, or no. Well, no, yeah, here we go. In November, another almost 50-point blowout. Oh, dang it. I lost my spot. I just had it, I thought. Oh, I clicked
Come
on the
on,
Thunder.
Jude.
I
Come
clicked on the
on.
Thunder. I can't believe myself, Ethan.
It's higher
Um,
up. There you go.
there we go. There we go. Um, Are you getting that sound too,
I
Ethan?
am. I am.
I can't believe this. I thought I changed it again. Y'all saw 123-87. Yeah, Thunder games have not been good, so it would be nice to at least have one competitive game against this Wemby Chet rivalry, if you will. It's not even just that. The Spurs and Thunder are division rivals. And obviously they're much further ahead than we are. But I think with the rodeo road trip ending and then getting smacked in the past two games,
Hmm.
they've got stuff to play for tonight. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they have every reason to make it competitive, and even if it isn't, Jude, I think Spurs fans can rely on the classic Wemby versus Chet matchup at least being entertaining. Those guys go at it even when we lose by 40 points, and hopefully, statistically, Wemby can get the better of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. I wish I had more to say to kind of break down this Thunder game, Ethan. But the bottom line is they're a team at the top of the West right now, and
Hmm.
we're the team at the bottom, which is similar to what happened on Tuesday. And it kind of makes me glad that I was working and we didn't do a post game that was initially scheduled. And I know if you go ahead and look at the final score, it looks like it was a little bit closer of a game than it actually was. And I do want to give the guys credit in the fourth quarter for
Mm.
what they did. But at the same time, for the most part, I just went and watched the highlights right before this as a refresher, Ethan. And they basically blew us out for the majority of the game. As a team sitting at the top of the West against a team at the bottom of the West should.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're right. The final score is not a good representation of how the game went. It was definitely one-sided match for 95% of the game.
Any other thoughts on that one, Ethan? I know you got to watch a little bit more of that game than I did, if I'm correct.
I got to watch approximately 3 minutes of the game.
Oh,
I
well, that's
had to
still
go to
more
work
than I
there.
did.
It is more than you did. And that first 3 minutes, we looked pretty good. We were executing for 3 minutes, but obviously that didn't last the entire time. I saw that Anthony Edwards got hurt briefly for a second, but I think he came back, right? Like it looked really
Yes,
bad in the
yes,
moment,
he
but he
did.
ended up coming back. And of course, watching the highlights, you saw a mix of both. Highlights are misleading. Like even the team that loses by 30 points is going to have a few nice baskets, right? But
For sure.
ultimately, it was a loss to a much better team. Um, but in terms of the Thunder tonight, Jude, just to say one last thing about this,
Go for it.
we can't let all their other shooters go crazy. If we can just handle those guys, like we know what Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is going to do, we know what Chet Holmgren's going to do. That will counterbalance with hopefully what Devin and Wemby are able to do. But our others have to stop their others because, like you said, Wiggins getting 22 on all those threes, the rest of their players getting hot and going crazy. That's what cost us in the last two matchups.
Yeah, and that's kind of been a story throughout this season, Ethan, leaving the shooters open and then them executing.
Exactly.
But the one positive note that I do want to say about this game, and I will say a good, I want to say at least like 7 or 8 of these points did come in the fourth quarter. So it is kind of a little bit of garbage time. But a good response from Keldon Johnson after getting benched. You can't take away 5 threes. I know
Yes.
missed 6, but still to get 26 and 4 and the steal as well. With 34 minutes as well. That's another thing I wanted to get into because I know Jeremy got benched later in the game. And I, looking at the minute total, like I said, I didn't watch the game, but looking at his minutes being only at 16, I believe that was for the rest of the game. And
Mm.
Wemby actually got pulled when he got pulled at the same time, but Victor obviously came back in with him playing 34 minutes as well. But just good response from Keldon, despite this game being a team at the top of the West versus the team at the bottom of the West.
Yeah, for sure. It was a tough few games for him, a tough stretch, and obviously he got benched. So it's great to see him bounce back mentally. And I think he talked about it. You sent me his post game, and it's like this is just part of, changing the standard here. Is when you can't accept losing, you can't accept mistakes. This is Pop keeping his players accountable. It doesn't matter if you're the most tenured player or if you're Blake Wesley just trying to fight for minutes at the end of the bench. So I'm happy that he did not respond negatively to it. And you mentioned in the previous games when he was benched that like he was still cheering for his teammates. He didn't seem
Yep.
down on himself. It was still a positive reaction to it. So hopefully that's what Jeremy gets out of it because he's had a couple of games too in a row
Yeah.
where he's been really he hasn't even been a Swiss Army knife. Like he's been pretty absent from the game as far as impact. Like
Yep.
usually if he gets 0 points, it's like, oh, he still played great defense. He had like 8 boards, 5 assists, whatever it is. But clearly he wasn't able to do that in 16 minutes of play. Um, so hopefully he can bounce back tonight. Who's his matchup against OKC? Is it J Dub?
Probably that's who I would say who it is. But a lot of the times we have him guarding Shea Gilgeous too.
Yeah, I'm talking about like who's guarding him. I would assume J Dub.
Yeah, probably because they kind of play him at the
Mm-hmm.
4 assembly, but they switch a lot too. Obviously Chet will be on Wemby. Maybe you could see some possessions where like Giddey's guarding him. That's the only other person I could think of. But
They're
they
pretty
just got Gordon Hayward too. I forgot
true.
about that.
True. They're a talented team defensively. Like I don't want to take anything away from them, but if they have one weakness, it's the lack of size and the interior. I know they have Chet Holmgren, who's a shot blocker, but he's like really their only true center, and he's thin. Kind of like us with Wemby. So I mean, they are similar to us because our backup center Zach Collins is not much of a rim protector. So if Jeremy can kind of channel that athleticism and aggressiveness and try and get some easy baskets on the inside tonight, might be a good game for him to bounce back offensively.
For sure. And we'll need his help on the boards,
Mm-hmm.
in a game tonight as well. And as you can see in his last 2 games, I'm sorry for the Burger King ad interrupting you, Ethan,
No,
like
you're fine.
twice there. I just can't. I I turned it off. I found a way to fix it, and then now it's coming back. But 0 points, 1 point in the last 2 games, and 4 rebounds.
0 for 7 shooting.
That to your point, that was kind of that just explains it. That explains Jeremy's last 2 games. I know before that actually had 4 straight
Yeah.
games with double digits, and pretty efficient shooting. So
Let's
did
get
you?
back to that.
There you go. There you go. Sorry, I
Very
heard a little bit of what you were saying there, but it was like felt like distorted in
Mm.
my headphones, so I wasn't sure if you talked or not. So sorry if I just
No, you're fine.
talked over you there.
You didn't interrupt me. You're good.
Cool. Well, Ethan, That is basically all there really needs to be said on the Timberwolves and OKC game. I'm sure we'll get into some comments as well, which I see some here that we're going to get to here in a second. But we do have some Spurs news to talk about finally today, Ethan.
Hmm.
We have an open roster spot. Marcus
Oh.
Morris and the San Antonio Spurs have agreed to a contract buyout, and CD Sissoko was also recalled to the regular San Antonio Spurs today. But don't get your hopes up too much for some CD minutes because he played this morning in the Austin Spurs' thrilling victory over the South Bay Lakers. I would actually, if you haven't watched any Austin Spurs highlights this year, go to the NBA G League YouTube channel and watch today's. It's like 6 minutes. It was a real competitive game, and it was eerily similar to the Clippers Lakers game last night, except unlike the Clippers, and granted, the Austin Spurs didn't have to go up against LeBron James, probably the greatest player of all time. But at the same time, they did have to go up against first-round pick Jalen Hood-Schifino, who had 38, but Paul Watson had 44 with 9 threes, Ethan. And the Spurs pulled it out, and Serge Ibaka made some clutch plays as well on Jalen Hood-Schifino defensively. He hit 4 straight free throws when the Spurs were up by 1 to kind of seal it. I tweeted about that. But yeah, a pretty entertaining, probably the most entertaining Austin Spurs game that I have seen this year.
Honestly, if you do want to be entertained, you should go watch the Austin Spurs because they are a little bit more competitive on most given nights than the San Antonio Spurs are. But it's great to hear about Serge Ibaka, right? Not Serge Ibaka. CD Sissoko coming to
Yes.
San Antonio Spurs. To me, that kind of he's actually on a full contract, right? So
Yes.
I'm hoping that now he'll actually get some meaningful minutes. I know he was recovering from that injury, but I'm a huge fan of his game. I know you are. I think you were more of a fan of him initially than I was. I think you actually thought he might play from the get go, if I'm not mistaken. I might
I
be
can't remember. I honestly may have said that.
if I'm overstating, I apologize, but I remember you being high on him to
I
say the
was,
least.
for sure.
But basically a Boris Diaw replica, but with better athleticism and better defensive upside, and really better upside all around because he's only 19 years old.
He's still 19.
Big fan of the unselfishness that he plays with. Obviously, there's a French connection. And coming off of our bench, giving us a little more energy and athleticism and juice, I think that what the hell? Why not? Give him some meaningful minutes because we're not going to win ball games anyway. So let's throw him out there. Maybe instead of Chetty Osman, which is difficult to say because I love Chetty Osman. We both do. He's a very consistent player for us. But at the end of the day, is he a part of our long-term future? Not really. And is he helping us win games? Obviously not. We're last in the conference. So I'm excited for Sissoko.
Did you just mention Champagny? Who was the other player that you just mentioned?
I said Chetty Osman.
Chetty. Okay. Sorry. I missed that a little bit.
No, you're fine.
Yeah. And I love Chetty so much.
Mhm.
I love the way he plays, but CD is kind of like Chetty with like 10 times better potential, at least right now. Maybe it turns out that he doesn't, end up being
Who knows?
that.
Mhm.
But they kind of actually have a lot of they have a similar game in a lot of ways. They do a lot of stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, and that was the other thing I wanted to say. Like if you just go look at CD's G League stats, that's not going to tell you the whole story with him.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's really the same with last year when he was playing for G League Ignite.
Mhm.
You could argue that as well. But he's always going for blocks. He's being physical on defense. He's got playmaking ability. He has good vision. He has that that European, base, I guess you could say, because he played professionally in Spain for a couple years before he played for the Ignite. So I would love to see him just get a flyer, especially with the way that this season's gone and the fact that we gave him a full contract last season. So Bryce Ritalo, or Ritalo, maybe? I'm sorry if I'm butchering that last name, but I saw your comment earlier. You said, glad to be in here live. We appreciate you being in here. And you're saying, what would it take during the course of the season for CD Sissoko to play for the Spurs? And I had to put that up because we were kind of just talking about that.
Beautiful. I think you'll see it sooner rather than later, Bryce.
Yeah, especially at least in the last 2 weeks of the season. I think we might even see some David Duke Jr. in the last 3 games or last 2 weeks of the season, dare I say, Ethan. I don't know about that actually, but I think there's a chance for it for sure. I think you will definitely see some Barlow, Sissoko, Wesley, Branham minutes in like the last 2 weeks of the season at some point. Maybe it's only like one game, but think
Mm.
about the Dallas game to end the year last year, Ethan.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. Is last year I don't think any of us expected Barlow, Mamu, Champagny, Bassi, all these random guys that showed up halfway through the year to play consistent minutes, and they ended up doing it and really earned themselves some roster spots.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because there were some other thoughts that I had regarding this open roster spot. There's two things I want to hit on. The first thing I want to hit on is last year when we were in this situation, we picked up Sandro Mamukelishvili.
Mm.
And I think it was a little bit earlier, and I can't remember exactly who we let go of to open up the roster spot. Um, was it Kem Birch? Or no, was that before the season
No, that was
started?
before this season.
Okay.
I think it honestly might have been no,
Was it after the trade deadline? Maybe we just had an open spot.
maybe because let's see, we traded Jay Rich for Devontae in 4 seconds, then we traded Jakob for. Did we get a player in return for Jakob?
I don't think so because that's Toronto, right? We just got
Mm-hmm.
picks, right?
Think we got
I'm bad at
picks.
this.
And if we had gotten somebody, maybe we just released them. I'm like, no, we got Kem Birch.
I'm gonna look up the
We got
Jakob.
Kem Birch.
Oh, that's right. No, he got released before this season.
Mm-hmm. So we
Yeah,
kept Kem Birch last year. I can't remember who we let go of. Jude, did someone get hurt? Did we have like a play, like an exception?
I don't think so, but I remember picking up Bassi
Mm,
early in the season, and then I think Champagny was like December, January, so he could kind of be thrown in that Mamu mold as well. But he was on a two-way last season, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, the point is, when we picked up Sandro, a lot of people probably just thought, okay, well, this is, until the end of the year just to take a flyer on a guy. And
Mm-hmm.
here we are next season, and he's made it another season with San Antonio. We'll see what happens this offseason, but that's the type of stuff that could potentially happen with this open roster spot. But the second thing, I mentioned that first. The second thing I want to mention is a beloved former Spur. Dude, the balloons, they just appear out of nowhere. I don't know what I don't know, dude. Like for those of y'all listening on
Oh man.
podcast, the Apple balloons just came up in my feed. Me and Ethan have talked about the thumbs up icon that we get, and Eric Pacina mentions who I was going to talk about before the balloons popped up, and maybe that's why the balloons popped up
Mm.
because Patty Mills was waived. We're not happy about Patty getting waived,
Mm-mm.
but if the Spurs pick him up and we bring him home, even if it's just for these last couple months, Ethan,
Mm-hmm.
then those balloons would be celebratory for that.
Yeah, I love Patty Mills. I think it honestly sort of kind of makes sense when you think about like what's a need on the team. You could argue point guard play. You could argue shooting. He provides both of those. He's a veteran leader, and I think his presence in the locker room would be the most beneficial thing he would provide to our team. Like he might not even touch the court if we signed him, and he might honestly retire after this year, type of thing. But for him to influence Blake Wesley, I think would be huge because he's a young point guard who's looking to take on more responsibility and to have a veteran like that to lean on. Not to say that Devontae's not that, but Patty was brought up in the Spurs culture. He's been around the league forever. He's a FIBA legend. He's 35, about to be 36. Like he provides a different level than to say a Devontae Graham or a Chetty Osman. So to that respect, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
And I know the Spurs are in a situation where you'd like to take a flyer on somebody like a Mamu, like
Mm.
we did last year, a younger player that maybe still has some potential.
Or a Barlow.
Um, right. That could be the case too. Maybe we end up moving his contract up. We'll see what happens with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I really, I love the idea of bringing in Patty because I think he would not only just the Spurs way and the way that he was brought up and he was a part of those championship teams, had interactions with Manu, Tony, Tim, Boris, all those guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what he would do in the locker room, like you mentioned, the mental aspect of the game in an NBA season,
Mm-hmm.
even if it was just for these last, it's about to be March. So basically 2 months left in the season at this point. I still think that time would be invaluable for,
Mhm.
like you said, a young Blake Wesley. You know what I mean? Even some of the other younger guys. I just think with the way that this season is gone, he would be able to provide so much knowledge to
Mhm.
like those guys if we were to bring him in. Now, obviously, I'm not opposed to other things. I'm going to trust in whatever the Spurs, end up doing. But as Bryce puts it here, Patty perfect fit, which we already know he's a
Mhm.
perfect fit in San Antonio. Couldn't agree more. And like you said, especially if he is really about to retire, come on, let him ride it out. Let him retire as a Spur. You know what I'm saying?
The only alternative, just to play devil's advocate here, is that maybe he doesn't want to come back to San Antonio because he is 35. Even if he is about to retire, like there's probably a contending team with an open
For
roster
sure.
spot that we just don't know of off the top of our head. That's like, you know what? Let's take a chance on Patty Mills. Maybe we can put him in at the playoff time, and he's been in those situations, and he can knock down a couple threes for us and make an impact. So, if that's on the table for him, I would understand completely if he decided to go that route instead.
Hey, Gorilla brings up a good point here. He says he
Oh,
wants reps before the Olympics. That is
that's
true
fair.
because he's probably going to go out and at least try to do that one more time, especially with Australia's, success with their basketball program.
And you know what? Maybe he's jaded with other teams, Jude, because he went to Brooklyn thinking he was going to be a championship contender. That obviously didn't pan out. Then he went to Atlanta thinking he was be a backup point guard, and they didn't even play him. Like that's honestly so sad. They didn't even play the guy. And maybe he just wants to come back home and be comfortable with Pop and just really embrace that leadership role.
Yeah, absolutely. I like Victor's comment here. He says Patty could help with Wemby's arm
Mm,
strength training on how to towel wave.
absolutely. Oh, and I know this is not what Jason's saying in the comments, but he could be possibly a liaison to Mr. Trey Young if that's actually on the table because they have a relationship now.
That is true, especially after his time in Atlanta.
Mhm.
And he could, hit him with a text or something and be like, "Hey, I know they're 11 and whatever, but I'm telling you, solid core
Coffee's really
here."
good.
The coffee's really good. I put up the coffee gang earlier from Eric
Thanks, guys.
Piscina. Shout out to the OGs.
Mhm.
Boris was in that. Wasn't Jakob? Didn't Jakob even get in that?
He was in it later on with Rudy Gay and
Yep.
Derek White. That was the later group. The OG though was Patty, Tiago, Boris, Manu, all those foreign guys.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. Well, other than that, Ethan, the other thing that I'm thinking about while we're talking here is kind of the Dom Barlow thing with the open roster spot because we've talked about that a lot.
Mm.
And honestly, as time, and before we move on, Eric Pacina says
Oh,
Eubanks.
of
You
course.
can't forget about our boy Drew Eubanks, right here on my wall, signed.
He puts the
Um,
Dunkin' in Dunkin' Donuts.
I like it. I
You like
like
that?
it.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, but Dom Barlow, as time has gone on, I, I am more. I don't think that we're going to bring him up, and
Mm,
the reason is kind of because of what we mentioned. Even when we first brought up this conversation, we're like, hey, little asterisk here. You know, he could still stay on the two-way just because he's 20 years old and can still get things out of developing in the G League. Um, and that's basically the reason that as time has gone on, I don't think that's going to be the case. Maybe I'll be proven wrong in the next 24 to 48 hours. But I think there's a lot that he can still benefit as much as it is, like an easy double double for him down there for the
mm,
most part. Like today, he didn't have one, but still, he had 15 on 7 of 10 shooting. And the reason he had 15 and 3, but the other side of that is that Paul Watson had like 44, and I think he had like 9 rebounds too.
mm,
And it was kind of just like, all right, Paul's hitting 9 threes tonight, and that's 44. So everybody's kind of just going to clear out. But I still think that they're like those reps are still beneficial for his development. Definitely next season. I think that's a conversation. Um, but I just think for the rest of the G League season, like it
mm,
would be beneficial for him to have the option of
mhm,
playing down there. Like I said, I think in the last 2 weeks of the season, we'll see Barlow back up there and get some minutes. Um, but I think we are going to keep him on that two-way for the rest of the year. And the more I think about it, I kind of see it. He's just
yeah,
still 20. You know what I mean? And the other thing I was thinking about with this too, Ethan, is like there's going to be some G League playoff reps in there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know it's the G League and it's not the same as the actual playoffs, but still, those like that would be a scenario that would be beneficial for Dom. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And something I forgot about, honestly, until you just said it, like Zach Collins is still on a 3-year contract, so we're likely going to want to play him despite Don Barlow maybe outplaying him. Plus, we've been giving Mamu more minutes.
Right.
Sissoko was just recalled, so he's going to probably get some minutes at that 4 spot. And you also have Chetty. So there's really not a lot of, like, strategically, if you're going to bring someone up, what's the only position we really need is at like that point guard spot or shooting guard spot. A guard. We don't necessarily need any more bigs. Um, so yeah, let him develop in Austin. That's fine. Now the more we've talked about it, the more I actually want Patty. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and just to bring him up because everyone always brings him up. If it was a choice between Killian Hayes and Patty Mills, I think I honestly might throw my hat at Patty Mills. If I'm being completely honest.
I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, I've heard that one too. And like, say in the next 2 days that actually does end up happening, I'm not going to be mad at that either because
No, no, me neither.
that would be similar to like Mamu, like we were saying, a
Mm-hmm.
younger player that has more untapped potential. Even though it has been a struggle for him in Detroit, but granted, it's also Detroit. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, but yeah, I think if I had to choose two, Ethan, it's if it was any other veteran point guard, obviously I'd roll with Killian Hayes. But the stuff that I think Patty could instill in our guys in the next 2 months, even though it's a limited time, like I said, I think would just be invaluable.
It's sad. Like, this is definitely not going to happen because I think he will either choose retirement or want to play for a contender. I don't think he wants to come back here necessarily. But Danny Green is also out there, just sitting at home.
Imagine if that happened.
We just bring both of them home. Come on,
We
guys.
only have one roster spot.
I know. Let's cut somebody. Let's cut.
No.
Let's waive anyone.
Wave anyone. Bring Danny back to train Julian.
Honestly, like literally, let him train Julian and let Patty train. What's his name? Blake Wesley.
Mamadi Diakite has to go. Well, he's on a two-way, so
I
that's
was
not
about to
an
say, is he even
actual.
on if he's on a full
You're
contract,
right.
then yes, get rid of him. Bye.
It was Kem Birch. Okay. Actually, though, as we wind down here with 2 minutes left to game time, I know we talked about it at the beginning, but I'm seeing this in the comments. Two Clutch Corey says, let's hope we can make a game of it instead of being down 18 at halftime. Gorilla says, let's all hope for a fairly competitive game.
Mm,
And then also Gorilla says, having a champion in the locker room 100.
big time.
But as we lead into this game, Ethan, before we get off here, probably in the next minute or so, final thoughts and points of emphasis for this game against the Thunder tonight.
Stop the other shooters. Don't give up wide open shots. Attack the basket. Attack Chet Holmgren. Get him in foul trouble. Shea Gilgeous is going to go crazy no matter what we do. If we can accomplish those 2 feats and not turn over the ball, we have a chance to make this competitive.
Completely agree. And to piggyback off that a little bit is don't let J-Dub go insane as well.
Mm.
Because if you have both of them going insane, then you're really putting yourself in a hole. And the other points of emphasis that I would have, Ethan, intensity on defensive rotations, playing physical, and not letting up and keeping that intensity up and that physicality up despite the situation. Because the Thunder are going to go on their runs.
Mm-hmm.
They may go on a run and put you down 10, but they're also going to do that to everybody. So if you can just stay the course, keep it at bay, and like everybody in the comments is saying, if we can accomplish the things that you said and keep the intensity up throughout the entire time, maybe we can have a single-digit loss. That's really what I'm hoping for. And I feel like that might be a little bit too much to ask, if I'm being honest.
That's so funny. Maybe we can come out of there with a single-digit loss.
But seriously, with
You're
what
not wrong.
123 to 87 and 140 to 114, let's just hope. I just want a game in the fourth quarter, Ethan. The last time I asked for that, I think it was the Kings game. They responded, so let's hope they do it again.
You know what? I'm gonna go out on a limb, Jude. I'm gonna say it. We're having a fight tonight. We're having a fight. Someone's fighting somebody.
I'm glad you said that, Ethan. I know we need to get off because the game just started, but somebody in the comments earlier, here we go. Millennial Media said, Ethan, how long till
Ooh.
Wemby and Chet inevitably get into a scuffle? I love it when they go at each other.
I don't think that they will get into a scuffle tonight, but I think someone will. I'm gonna go
Oh,
on a limb. I'm gonna say it's the backup J Dub, not the J Will,
okay.
and Jeremy.
Ooh, I was expecting Zach there, but
Mm,
okay.
that's my guess. That's my
Arkansas versus Baylor tonight. Book it.
Mhm. Book it. Smackdown.
We appreciate you guys hanging out with us. We'll let you guys get to tip off. Enjoy this game. Go Spurs, go. And if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button below. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. And if you're ready for the next post game, come hang out with us Sunday night after, I can't remember who we play, but I already have it up on the channel. Y'all can go see. Come hang out with us Sunday. We'll catch y'all later. Go Spurs, go.